Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. Obviously, as usual, we're going to give a few minutes for people to join the live session. But welcome, very glad to have you here, either watching live or watching back on demand. And special welcome to anyone who's been at any of our other previous webinars this year. Very glad to have you back for this one. For those that don't know me, I'm James. I'm the content lead here at Lunio. And our guest today is Violeta, lead gen specialist and founder of Clickable.
Hello.
So how are you today,
Hi,
Violeta?
everyone. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. The sun has just come out in Manchester, which is a rare occurrence. And yeah, nice to see. But I'd just like to call out the fact that when we were preparing for the session today, you told me that you had actually attended the very first webinar that I hosted when I joined Unio about 2 years ago. And that was
Yeah,
with Bob and Miles from PPC Mastery. And it was back in 2022 when PMax had just been released and people were experimenting with it. We've done a few more webinars since then, but it's very nice to have you here as a guest today. But
quite full circle, isn't it? And I do remember Bob was still in the van doing the webinar from there. So that was an interesting webinar, not something you usually see.
yeah, for sure. And you're part of the PPC hub, like the community that Bob and Miles run. And how have you found being part of that community?
Oh, it's been great. It's been very helpful for me, especially since I started being a freelancer, because you tend to be a bit more lonely, working only by yourself. So having the community has helped a lot.
Yeah. And you mentioned there in your answer, you've in those 2 years, since 2022, you have made that transition from working in an in-house marketing team to, founding your own agency. And obviously, I imagine there's been a lot of learning throughout that process. But how's that
Definitely.
been? How's that transition been from in-house to freelance?
Yeah, I think because I've been in PPC for 8 years, I've worked for in-house and also agencies, and I think I actually panicked more before transitioning than actually when I did transition. I do enjoy it a lot. I do enjoy that I can work on different accounts and helping different clients. And yeah, the learning curve has been like exponentially. Also, the PPC team, so the Miles and Bob's courses have been really helpful.
Yeah. A lot of new experiences, I guess, but
Yeah.
it's great to see the kind of journey that you've been on. So we have had a few more people join now, so we will get going. Just to let people know, we're aiming for around 50 minutes to get through the content today, with around 10 minutes left at the end for a Q&A with Violeta, which I will say more about in just a second. But before we dive into the agenda and the content, there are just a few quick bits of housekeeping to get into before we get going. So we are recording the session today, and it will be available to watch back on demand. And if you have any specific questions for Violeta, please do pop them into the Q&A tab so that they don't get lost in all the memes that I can see popping up here in the public chat. So if you have a question, use the Q&A tab, and we will try to get around to as many of those as we can at the end of the session. Also, you can upvote your favorite questions. If someone else has asked a question that you would like to see answered as well, you can upvote for it in the Q&A tab. We'll also have a member of our team here responding to some of the questions via text, kind of behind the scenes. Also, you will see beside the Q&A tab, we've also got a docs tab here in Goldcast, and I will be directing your attention there at relevant parts throughout the session today. Where you can get more context and some free resources that relate to some of the content that we'll be covering. In the doc section, you can also find a link to Violeta's LinkedIn profile, so you can connect with her if you'd like to learn more about any of the topics that we covered today. And I'm sure she'll be happy to answer any questions and help out if you reach out to her. We'll also be running a few audience polls during the session, which you can vote on in the polls tab. So please do give us your responses there. You should see a notification pop up whenever a new poll is open for responses. And you can respond to it by clicking on the polls tab and submitting your answer. The polls tab will open up when I open a poll. So on that note, we're just going to open the first poll here. If I just open that, you should see the polls tab open now, and I'll just share this on screen just for the first one. And the first poll today relates to the announcement from TikTok last week that they will be rolling out keyword targeting functionality within their existing search ads feature. If you're not aware of that, we published a blog about TikTok search ads and how that functionality works on the Lunio blog, and you can find that in the docs tab. So obviously the poll is, will this new keyword targeting functionality lead you to experiment with TikTok ads or increase your investment if you are already running them? Obviously, there's a lot of undecided people here already in the poll I can see, which perhaps because we have a slightly more B2B lead gen focused session today, that's somewhat unsurprising. Obviously, TikTok is a much better choice for retail and e-commerce, but with the rollout of features such as this, it may be the case that might become more useful for B2B in the future. Our CEO at Lunio, Neil, actually wrote a post about this feature and kind of his thoughts on why this could potentially threaten Google's ad revenue, this kind of search functionality, keyword targeting being introduced to TikTok. So you can check out Neil's post in the docs tab as well. But very quickly, Violeta, before we move on, what are your kind of thoughts on this feature?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because if you look like certain social media platforms now, they're looking into search. And then on the other hand, Google Ads is trying to integrate things that you usually find on social media platforms. So it just seems like you're getting more of that kind of cross-channel, placements within one platform. So definitely an interesting feature to experiment. I'm actually very curious to see how good they are at matching searches with the actual brands.
Yeah, no doubt they'll probably have some teething problems and there'll be some stuff to iron out on their side, but it is.
We're going to laugh a lot, yes.
Yeah, but it is. I think I think that does have the potential to pose some kind of threat to Google's revenue in the future, but we will see how that plays out. So that was the poll question. As I said, the other polls won't be shared on screen, but you will see a notification pop up when the poll is open. And again, the polls tab will open there next to the docs and the Q&A. So with all that said, I'm just going to bring our agenda slide on screen, and we're just going to go through the key points that we will be covering during the session today. So we have got 9 main points on the agenda. So firstly, we'll be looking at some basic troubleshooting when it comes to increasing both lead volume and lead quality. Next, we'll talk about how invalid traffic affects lead quality, and Violeta will share some insights into what she experienced when she implemented Lunio to enhance lead quality when she worked in-house for the online course creation platform LearnWorlds. Then Violeta will talk us through the details of her B2B omni-channel lead gen strategy via a case study from one of her clients. After that, we'll discuss the essential prerequisites before attempting to use PMax for lead gen. And we'll also briefly look at the fire and ice strategy developed by Bob from PPC Mastery. And after that, we will cover how to maximize the impact of display retargeting campaigns. And we'll also unpack why you should be tracking marketing efficiency ratio to properly attribute incremental performance improvements due to those display retargeting campaigns. Then we'll go on to look at the do's and don'ts of competitor bidding for lead gen. And we've got a few clever copy or ad copy examples to look at there when it comes to avoiding mentioning your competitor's name directly in your ad copy, but still making it very clear who you're referring to. Following on from that, we will explore how to use humor to make your B2B ad creative stand out. And we've actually got some great resources and ad libraries to recommend during that section that you can use for inspiration when creating your next set of visual assets. After that, we will look at some tips to adapt your paid search strategy for Microsoft ads and why attempting to simply replicate your Google Ads account structure in Microsoft will inevitably lead to a lot of wasted ad spend. And lastly, we will very quickly cover how to keep your retargeting costs down on LinkedIn and Meta. As I mentioned before, when we get through all the content, we will have the Q&A session at the end with Violeta. So just please put those questions into the Q&A tab. That is everything on the agenda for today. So we will move on to our first topic, which is about lead volume and lead quality. So we're kind of starting out with the basic fundamentals here, Violeta, which are at least in part captured by the two memes on the slide here. So what would be the first things that you would look into if you had a client that was experiencing low lead volume?
Yeah, so first of all, obviously conversion tracking, just to make sure that what I'm looking is the real lead volume. And also what I do, I look also at the landing page, and I usually install Hotjar or Microsoft Clarity from the beginning, just to understand why the clicks are not becoming necessarily leads, and you can spot quite a few things on the back of that. And then if you're still struggling even after this, I would suggest using micro conversions, so going a step ahead of the actual submission, let's say. Just make sure that you're not going too far on a time frame when it comes to your prospect.
What examples of kind of micro conversions would you be looking at commonly?
So usually, like if you're, for example, let's say you have a guide, make sure that the guide is very much related to doing the action right on the back of that. While if it's something like, I don't know, the market trends, which is more of an article that, might be interesting, but then they will become a lead like 3 months later, you'll be quite difficult to build that volume now and actually get the bidding strategy working for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the kind of the flip side or the follow-up to that is if you are in a situation where you are getting leads through, but a significant chunk of them are not making it through the qualification stages, kind of reflected on this meme here with the guy doing push-ups for every one unqualified lead he gets. What are the first areas that you would investigate if it was lead quality seems to be the main issue?
Yeah, so I usually, with all my clients, I have access to their CRM, so I'm able to check those leads right away. One tip I would say, have your form having a description. It can be really easy then to identify, just based on what people write, if they are interested in the service or product on the back of that, and have communication with the sales team, because they can tell you a lot about what people are actually saying in the calls, like why they're not moving forwards, because you also want to identify if it's because of the searches, is it the landing page, like they're just not clear of what exactly they are applying for, or is actually a market fit, or the price.
Nice. Yeah, I think that that point about kind of constant communication with the sales team is a good point. And I know when you worked kind of in-house for Learn Worlds, was that something that you were doing kind of on a regular basis, sync in with the sales team to understand any issues with leads that were coming through?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we did have some processes in place for us to identify at least the quality from how people interacted with our platform, because it's not just B2B, they also have B2C. So we were able to kind of pick up on the quality from just the back of our data. But also the sales team would tell us if the B2B leads are not exactly aligned with what they were thinking.
Yeah. So kind of as a follow-on to that point, we will just talk a bit about how invalid traffic or IVT affects lead quality. So there's a brief overview of it on the slide here. And spam leads can come from a variety of sources, including from real people who have absolutely no genuine interest in your product or service. But a decent chunk of spam leads do arise as a result of sophisticated bot activity, which attempts to mimic human behavior on landing pages. And I'm sure at least some of you will have experienced questionable looking lead form submissions come through on your campaigns, or you may notice suspicious patterns of influxes of spam leads coming in at particular times of the day or week, or you may notice you're getting a lot of junk leads from one particular geographic region. In any case, that bot activity has not only wasted some of your budget via the clicks on the ad through to the landing page, but the fake leads that sometimes follow on from those fake clicks then contaminate your CRM, which wastes the time and energy of your sales team, who understandably can get quite frustrated, which is summed up in that meme featuring Ariana Grande there on the slide. Never thought we'd have Ariana Grande on one of these webinars, but there she is. Obviously, how affected your campaigns are by that kind of activity varies significantly from business to business. But the data we collect at Lunio shows the average IVT rate for Google search campaigns sitting around the 5% mark. But when we start to look at some of the outliers in the distribution of IVT rates, on the high end, we see search campaigns with IVT rates of 10% or more, and a disproportionate amount of those outliers do come from B2B brands that are running lead gen campaigns. And to give a concrete example of that, when we looked at the 2023 data for LearnWorlds, where Violeta used to work in-house, their paid search IVT rate tended to fluctuate between 10% and 14%. So Violeta, before we move on here, could you just tell us a bit more about what led you and the rest of the team at LearnWorlds to implement Lunio? What was the challenge you were facing, and what impact did IVT protection have on lead quality for you guys?
Yeah, so it was visible they were getting invalid traffic. You can kind of see it, as you said, like from the searches, like also in the back end. And even though you're trying to block that traffic through, blocking the domains, the email addresses, that look suspicious, it's a very manual work. And a lot of the times we don't have that time from developers. So obviously we needed a lot more concrete solution that would just do this in the background, and we can focus on obviously running our campaigns without worrying for wasted spend.
And I think when we spoke before, you'd mentioned that you'd implemented CAPTCHA to try and address the problem, but it still wasn't kind of fixing the issues that you were having.
Yeah, so we did implement the CAPTCHA, and as I said, like we were going through the email addresses and stuff, but that obviously it's ineffective also because you're still paying for the click, so you're blocking something but not enough. And also some bots actually can pass CAPTCHA, so it's not a bulletproof solution. We just needed something that is more concrete and will protect us better from wasted spend.
Yeah, and for anyone that is interested in learning more about how Lunio can help uplift lead gen performance, you can check out the 2 case studies, which are in the Docs tab, one from LearnWorlds and one from Canto. That's where the 2 quotes that you can see on the slide here come from. And Violeta, you used to work alongside Tatiana when you were there at LearnWorlds, right? Yeah,
I was part of her team, yeah.
Yeah, and if you are interested in finding out, what your own current average invalid traffic rate is across your lead gen campaigns, you can request a free traffic audit with Lunio, where we will monitor and analyze all your paid ad clicks. And at the end, you'll find out exactly where each of your campaigns stand in terms of invalid traffic. And then once you have that data in hand, you can decide what you want to do from there. But it's always good to have the data on the traffic quality across each of your campaigns. The link to request that traffic audit can also be found at the top of the Docs tab if you're interested in that. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide here. And now I'm going to pass it over to Violeta, and she's going to take us through a B2B omni-channel case study and kind of talk us through step by step the process and the journey that she followed with her client, which led to some very impressive performance improvements. So Violeta, over to you, and I will kind of move through the slides as we go here.
Yeah, sure. So this is a B2B client that I have, in which I approached it more like differently, not having just Google Ads, but also doing a more omni-channel lead gen strategy, just to increase the also the search volume, but also the lead volume. The challenge was that I didn't have any conversion data in Google Ads from the beginning. Also, the search volume was low. It's more of a niche industry, and I had to address only sellers, not the buyers, because the sellers are what brings revenue to the business, which obviously did mean that I couldn't use Performance Max or Broad at the beginning. I had to rely heavily on phrase and exact and build good signals first, and a good pool of leads in order to be able to move on to automated bidding strategy and broad match and have a good search structure. And I also followed up with other channels. And if you move on to the next slide, the approach I had about the other channels was actually to use a principle called frequency illusion, which is a cognitive biases, which happens when you actually see something for the first time and then you have the impression that it's everywhere. It makes you believe that it's more common and that it is in reality. So we try to basically mirror this on all our target audience. So if you go on the next slide.
Yep.
All right. So what we've done is having retargeting campaigns on as many platforms as possible. So we had display retargeting, also retargeting on Facebook and Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Bing. And actually, we even launched a prospecting campaign for a secondary audience that we knew that it is involved in the decision, that it acts a bit more like an advisory to our target audience. And what we've seen is that people, first of all, the visitors will come back on search, and also because we were also retargeting the leads, we were seeing the leads coming back and actually converting into deals if they haven't done that from the beginning, later on, like 6 months and even a year later.
Nice.
And also the results were really good. Like obviously here I'm looking at all channels when I'm talking about the ROAS. I'm not taking individual channels and looking at ROAS by each platform. And it took about 6 months to get there. But yeah, the data has been like tremendously better, and it did help the business to develop. They had to actually hire one more salesperson.
Nice. And then I think the last one, you have the alterations that you made to this form.
Yeah, one of the things that we also done is to move from the 2-step form to 1-step form, which helped us a lot with completion rates. It actually moved from just below 3 to 7.3. And that was very, very helpful, obviously, just to get more leads from the budget we had. That's why I said from the beginning, have Hotjar, have Microsoft Clarity to actually be able to investigate that properly and see if people are just not actually interacting the way you would expect with your forms. Yeah,
and those kind of relatively small percentage changes can have huge impacts on the overall campaign performance. And yeah, it's definitely worth experimenting with that. Really impressive results there, Violeta, and definitely some approaches and strategies worth experimenting with. I think that frequency illusion that you mentioned, I hadn't really heard of that until I looked at the slides that you were helping me prepare for this. And it does kind of make sense when you think about it to just be top of mind everywhere. And if you can put your ads on all platforms and make sure that you're retargeting in the most efficient way, it will deliver results in the long term. So as you can see, I've moved the slide on already, and we are going to talk about PMax for lead gen, which is a bit of a polarizing issue captured by the Mean Girls meme on the slide here. Many people do just try to avoid PMax altogether when it comes to lead gen. I think the poll that's open right now relates to that and whether you use PMax for lead gen or not. Some people do feel it can deliver good results when approached in the right way. And I will say a bit more about that in relation to this fire and ice strategy developed by Bob from PPC Mastery, which you can see on the screen here. But before I talk about that fire and ice strategy, first, I just wanted to pass it to you, Violeta, and just ask if you personally use PMax campaigns for your client accounts that you manage, and if not, why not?
I have used it for B2C lead gen, but not for B2B, just because of the control I need over the terms. And especially if you're in an industry where you're also faced with the problem of having searches similar to what you'll see on B2C, you really have to be on top of where exactly you're showing. So PMax wasn't really an option for me.
That makes sense, but let's just say hypothetically you had a client and they were really adamant that they wanted to trial PMax for lead gen. What are the kind of essential prerequisites that you say they need to have in place before they launch PMax for lead gen?
Yeah, so definitely an optimal account, having search maxed out as much as possible and working as optimal as possible. So high amount of data in terms of your conversions. And also when you're approaching PMax, make sure that you can get like really good quality creatives, especially the video, because obviously it will influence how it's also displaying and if it's clear enough. I mean, we see more and more the creatives really doing that filtering through audience, and like PMax is no different. Definitely, you do want to have a good foundation before you start with PMax.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something that we've covered on previous webinars before, but it's I don't know, Violeta, have you seen some of those like auto-generated videos that PMax will put together?
Yes, I
Yeah.
did.
Yes.
They're very rudimental right now.
Yes, it's not great. AI still has a little bit of a way to go when it comes to those videos in particular. If anyone doesn't know what we're talking about and doesn't know what one of these videos that PMax auto generates looks like, if you go to the docs tab and scroll down, you'll see a video where it says removing auto generated videos from PMax. And if you click on that, it will take you to a video from Darren Taylor, where you can see an example of what one of these videos looks at, or what it looks like, sorry. And one of the things that makes me laugh is just some of the music that they choose to play in the background. It's just kind of, I don't know where they're getting this music from, but it's so bad. So
yeah, definitely make your own video. Like, don't rely on AI yet. We're not there yet.
yeah. So high quality video and visual assets is essential if you are planning to use PMax for lead gen. So given that that's the case, sorry, Violeta, go ahead.
Yeah. So one thing actually I forgot to mention is be careful once you have PMax, just check your search, and if it gets worse, because probably PMax is kind of cannibalizing on search. So just definitely check on that as well.
Yes, that's a good point. Especially on brand terms, I believe it can be quite bad for cannibalizing there. The other question I was going to say is just like, okay, so we know that video quality is important. Have you got any recommendations when it comes to creating good quality videos for PMax?
So definitely you'll have to experiment. I usually, when I run anything with a video, I will look on how much is watched of the video, because you'll give me enough information if, for example, the hook at the beginning is not working, or is it later on, like the storytelling doesn't work too well, or is it towards the end and people don't actually take the action even though they'll just watch the whole video. Then I kind of know what part of the video is not working, and you don't have to change the whole video, just change the part that seems to be problematic and take it from there, run it again, and see if anything changes.
Nice. And for anyone else looking for additional advice on how to create good video ads with strong opening hooks, as Violeta was referring to there, you should go and check out our PPC efficiency playbook, which you can find in the docs tab. And if you go to the chapter on display and video ads, which we created in partnership with Silvio Perez from Ad Conversion, you will find lots of really useful tips from Silvio there, and also a simple framework to follow when you are scripting out your video ads and kind of experimenting with different variants of your opening hook. One thing that we're not going to really mention in this session much, but I think it goes without saying, Violeta, that you would say that the same caution applies if you're attempting to use demand gen for lead gen campaigns, even more so because it's even more visually driven and video is even more important there. So
yeah, and I would say, like, I think with B2B, I know it's like a lot more challenging because you don't have a product necessarily to rely all the time. It's usually services. So I get that it's more challenging to visually create the story. But once you're doing it, it does give a lot of good results. So it's worth the investment.
yeah. And lastly, before we move on, and also I can just see one question there in the chat about getting better quality leads from PMax, which I'm hoping what I'm about to explain will help address that question. Just a reminder again, if you have questions for Violeta, just pop them into the Q&A tab just so that they don't get lost in the other stuff there in the main chat. So I'm going to just very briefly summarize the fire and ice strategy that you can see outlined on the slide here. But for anyone that is interested in going into more detail, we've included the link to the original article from PPC Mastery in the Docs tab, so you can check that out in full. But to summarize, the main issue with using PMax for lead gen is that a single offer, for example, book a demo, is going to be pushed across both top of funnel channels like search, bottom of funnels like search, and also top of funnel channels like YouTube display and discovery. And if you're selling an expensive product or service, pushing a demo or consultancy in those upper funnel channels simply isn't going to drive the clicks or conversions that you want. So to get around this problem, that's why Bob created this fire and ice structure, and it creates two separate PMax campaigns. One focused on prospecting colder traffic in the upper funnel channels, where you're usually promoting some kind of lead magnet or some kind of free offer in those upper funnel channels. And then the other fire campaign is focused on converting warmer traffic coming primarily through search. And in the infographic on the screen here, it basically summarizes the key differences between how those two campaigns should be set up. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into all that detail, but you can find out everything you need to know if you are interested in trialing that fire and ice strategy from the PPC Mastery article in the Docs tab. So with that, we will move on to our next topic, which is display retargeting. So Violeta, before we speak about best practices for display retargeting, could you firstly explain to us why it's important to consider market and efficiency ratio, the equation for which is on the slide here, and why is that important for evaluating the performance in this campaign type?
Yeah, so as you saw in my case study, like I pretty much looked at from this perspective at all my channels, because it's very easy to think that something like a display retargeting doesn't actually help because you just don't see necessarily conversions coming from it. But if you are looking a bit deeper into the attribution in GA4, for example, or what I also do in the CRM, you do see that it actually helped the visitor come to your website a few times. And perhaps like they took a bit longer to become a lead, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't contribute. That's why you want to have, as many platforms out there doing retargeting for you so that you keep top of mind with your target audience. And even with the leads, I think once you have a lead doesn't necessarily mean it brought revenue to and bottom line to the business. So keeping top of mind there while there's still negotiations perhaps or still discussions, or even like the deal is lost for now, it does help a lot, and you will see actually the leads coming back. But yeah, display ads, you would probably think it's not contributing because it's not contributing in the sense of conversions, but it does contribute on top of mind and bringing people back to the website and just keeping the heat basically.
And like, how big of an impact can it have, on search campaigns when you display retargeting switched off due to that kind of apparent underperformance?
personally, I didn't switch it off, but yeah, I do see it in like on CRM side, I do see it in the actual like journey. And some journeys are very long. Like if you actually go through the amount of touch points someone will be doing, not just on your website, but just in terms of like channels, depending on obviously in what industry you're running this. It's really contributing, and I would assume that if I would pause it, then I'm missing on touch points, and again, like the strategy will have a problem, like will have a gap in which I'm not bringing back traffic on search, and also to the website or on this lead to deal rate will be affected.
Nice. So before we move on to our next topic, are there any other best practices that you would recommend when it comes to lead gen retargeting campaigns that people should keep in mind?
Yeah, obviously creatives. I know I sound a bit repetitive now, but creatives do help. And yes, it is a bit more challenging on B2B, especially if you're doing a service that needs to be explained a lot more. So definitely experiment with your creatives. Have video, have also a video for shorts. People use it more and more. So I do think it's such a gap even for B2B. And also do retarget your leads as well, not just your visitors or, like what you consider as like a qualified audience pre-lead, because it does influence like the whole process, like even moving into deal. Like if they don't pick up the phone, is it an actual lost lead? No, not necessarily, if you do keep the top of mind.
Nice. So with that, we will move on now to talk about competitor keyword bidding, which is a big topic, especially in the world of B2B SaaS, but in many other sectors as well. So on this slide here, we can see some of the pros, cons, and best practices for competitor keyword bidding campaigns. So Violeta, could you kind of talk us through those pros, cons, and best practices there?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, it's a controversial topic, definitely. A lot more often you find it in SaaS, and especially in industries that they are very competitive. If you are the underdog of the industry, it's definitely worth it because you can just piggyback on established brands and just get to the right people a lot faster. And it does pay to outrank them if you can, obviously. Sometimes the CPCs might be a bit lower, but obviously it depends a lot on like what competitors you're talking about, what industry. So experiment there and just see if that's also a positive aspect. On the con side, though, do be prepared because obviously you're going to become a target as well. They will be able to spot you most likely in the auction insights. So have your brand campaign running. Make sure you have trademark your brand. And of course, when you're designing the ads, with competitor's name, you will have to misspell it, so it won't, like, the quality won't be there. I mean, it's funny because I have run a lot of campaigns and I've become quite good at trying to misspell it in a way that people wouldn't spot the misspell. So something like double I's, for example, it's easy to miss. So yeah, have experiment a bit on that as well. And obviously be aware that the quality score won't be the same as what you have on non-brand. You will have a lower conversion rate, but in the end, like, you just want to see if there is any opportunity by taking different competitors and experimenting with that. On the best practices side, I would say what I usually do when it comes to this, if the brand is quite big, just go on Reddit and see what people are complaining about, or forums, and it will give you such a good pool of keywords to go for. Obviously, the usual, customer service, website down, replacement, these are quite often a good start, but you can go more in depth by just looking for what problems people usually have. And you'd be surprised how, if you bring it also in the ad copy, it can help quite a bit with converting someone from a competitor to your service. One mistake, though, that I see a lot is people they don't have dedicated landing pages. First of all, it doesn't look like a landing page. It's more of a blog post detailing a lot of competitors. I would say don't do that. Be a lot more concise and clear, and have only the competitor which you're bidding against you with, the USPs, like the best features that you have. Be very like for like kind of split. And if you do need to detail anything, just try to do it more at the bottom of the page. And also don't introduce other competitors, because you're just basically doing brand awareness for them. You're also creating like a paradox of choice, because now people will feel like they have to go and research the rest. And usually we end up with such a long list. It will just be a very boring page, and it won't do enough for you. So yeah, try to keep it short. And of course, don't go for competitors that you don't have advantage over, because you're just going to waste money. People do investigate a lot more, and they will find out if you're actually not the best solution for them.
Nice. So many useful points in there. I especially like your recommendation about going to Reddit and forums and seeing what people are complaining about. That's a really useful tip, because there's a lot of angry people on Reddit who are dissatisfied with their services that they're getting. So that's a really great point, actually. One thing is, obviously we talked about the CPCs might vary. It won't always necessarily be lower depending on who you're bidding against. But how aggressively would you be spending on some of these competitor campaigns?
It will depend on what you're actually getting back from it. If you know you're a superior solution, and you're new in the market, you do need to make that mark. You can go more aggressive. Of course, it does depend on your budgets. If you're not able to go to the levels that they establish brands, but if you are smart about it, and as I said, look through those Reddits and go very deep on what kind of problems they have, you can really see some great results by being a bit more aggressive.
Nice. And lastly, are there any circumstances in which you would absolutely not recommend competitor bidding?
I mean, for example, like if it's an industry that it's a lot about the price. For example, energy providers have this problem, and then if you're you can't deliver the low price that your competitors are, there is no point of going for it, because price is basically the only indicator people take in consideration for choosing energy suppliers. So in that industry, it is a bit more challenging. You'll have to really look perhaps in regions that you could get a better price and try to bid like that, because it might just not work for you due to the price.
Yeah, and before we move on to our next topic, for anyone interested in learning more about competitor bidding, there are two resources in the Docs tab. One is a YouTube video from Darren Taylor, and the other is an article that we've written here at Lunio on the do's and don'ts of bidding on branded keywords. And thank you to Peter from the comment section there, who is finding some of the content useful so far. That's really nice to hear. So we will move on, and we will look now just quickly at two ad examples, kind of similar to what Violeta was referring to in the misspelling of the competitor brand name. So you can see these two examples. They actually come from the Lunio blog, which I just mentioned, and it's in the Docs tab. But I just wanted to highlight them here, as they're kind of good examples of ways that you can get creative in your competitor displacement ad copy and make it clear who you're referring to without actually using the brand name. Obviously, you can misspell it, but the first example here, one from the landing page heat map tool Mouseflow. They were bidding against their competitor Hotjar, that has been referenced by Violeta multiple times. And the ad copy headline that Mouseflow chose to go with was "The jar ain't hot anymore," which it doesn't actually mean anything. There's no risk of infringement or defamation there, but the audience who see that ad know exactly what they're getting at. The ad might make people smile, might even get people to click. And plus, if you look at the first site link extension that they've got on that ad, it's highly relevant to those searchers who are looking for a Hotjar. And next, we have an example from Monday.com CRM product who were bidding against Salesforce. Their headline, a CRM that's actually easy to use, appeals directly to unhappy Salesforce users, because one of the well-known frustrations and pain points with Salesforce is that the user experience does tend to be quite clunky in a lot of cases. And even if those searchers aren't actively looking for a Salesforce alternative, this might plant the idea in their head that there could be a better CRM out there for them. So do think carefully about the messaging and phrasing that you choose for these competitor displacement campaigns. So we will move on now to look at humor in B2B ads. And Violeta, could you talk us through where this chart, what this chart on the slide is telling us and where it comes from?
Yeah, so actually I got served an ad from LinkedIn on LinkedIn with this article. So great targeting on their side there.
Nice.
Definitely keep an eye on them. They're great indicators for figuring out like what works actually on LinkedIn. And I do the same with Meta. There you can learn so much from what they're doing. But in this article, basically, it's discussing being more bold and creative with B2B ads and what level they are now, like what's the perception in among the business decision makers. And you see like at the bottom, obviously clear message is like usually what you see the most because a lot of the B2B ads are focused on functionalities and features and how they're better than someone else. However, when it comes to humor and connection and emotional appeal, they're lacking quite a bit. And it just feels that I think with B2Bs especially, there's this communication, I guess, with to entities, but the human is not really included in the ad. And the article goes quite in depth into like how being more creative actually does drive better results, and it helps you connect and engage with your target audience a lot easier. It does basically the filtering for you in terms of audience, especially in those industries that it's hard to really pick and point of who is the decision maker. And it definitely pays to be a bit more human in the ads and more humorous and kind of stretch a bit the comfort zone of what your industry usually runs. First of all, because you have an advantage over competitors, but second of all, because you can connect a lot easier with your target audience.
Nice. And for anyone that is interested in reading that LinkedIn study in full, there is a link to that in the documents tab as well. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to move on here quickly. And we're going to, as I mentioned at the start, just want to show some really useful sources of inspiration and advice when it comes to B2B ad creative. So firstly, the two memes that you can see on screen here, the one with Danny DeVito made me laugh when I saw it. But these were sourced from a LinkedIn post from Josh Krakauer, and he put together 19 examples of B2B meme-based ads. And you can find that link to Josh's LinkedIn post in the documents tab. And then also on the right-hand side of the slide here, it's a screen grab from a post from a guy called Tim Davidson, who shares a lot of useful tips on LinkedIn when it comes to using B2B using humor in your B2B ad creative and how to make it a bit more human and a bit more relatable. So Tim Davidson is definitely worth following if you plan to experiment with this kind of thing in your campaigns. You can find the link to his post in the documents tab. And Violeta, you also have an additional ad library to recommend. So could you tell people more about that ad library and why you find it useful?
Yeah, so it's from Joseph Hill. It's just like loads and loads of ads that he picked from the internet, from LinkedIn mostly. It's a very good inspiration like hub for me. I usually use it to just kind of get ideas of what else I could do. And also if you're struggling with that, use jargons, use pain points, frustrations. Actually ask your sales team about it because they will know a lot more on that. People do usually share what they're frustrated about, and it can just be your next ad basically.
Nice. So just to leave 5 minutes for Q&A, we're going to go very quickly through our last two sections. So as you can see on the slide here, and as I mentioned before, simply replicating your Google Ads account structure in Microsoft isn't going to work. So Violeta, could you talk us through how you would adapt your strategy to optimize lead gen performance on Bing search?
Yeah, even though they do have the import options, obviously from Google Ads, perhaps don't attempt to like literally replicate everything from Google Ads. It doesn't work too well. Just start small and focus on the top performing keywords, because Microsoft is a lot broader, also with broad just a search, but also obviously you can't be as selective with placements. And you do need more time to give it for the bidding strategy to work properly. It's also very inconsistent sometimes, like 1 week will be good and then next week will be completely like rubbish. So just have some patience and just experiment, and definitely look into those searches properly and the placements.
Yeah, and if you're concerned about Google Performance Max, then maybe just stay clear of Microsoft Performance Max for lead gen until there's significant performance improvements in that area. With that, we'll move on to our final topic, which is just retargeting. We don't have much time left, but Violeta, could you just kind of summarize some of the best practices you follow to keep retargeting costs down on both Meta and LinkedIn?
Yeah, so obviously when you're considering costs, like definitely consider it with like basically it will help you to get those touch points. And one thing to keep in mind, like Meta works better for one single decision maker versus LinkedIn that is better for multiple decision makers. So do tailor maybe your approach to that as well. And definitely creatives. They make such a big difference now, and like hence why you hear everywhere that you do need to upgrade your messaging, that you need to be more connected with, because people's attention span is at like the lowest probably like we've seen. So make sure your creative is in check, experiment, and when you're doing retargeting, use all the data you can get your hands on, leads, pre-qualify leads, even like customer lists, and just experiment maybe even with that.
Nice. Thank you very much. So with that, that's it for the content. And with the time that we've got left, we are going to address a few questions from the Q&A tab. As I said, there's quite a few in there, so we're not going to get around to all of them, but there are a few upvoted questions as well. So if I just bear with me 1 second, and I will try to find the question that I've located here. So this question is, Violeta, do you have any tips for search ads targeting when you're in a B2B business, but the same terms can be searched by B2C?
Yeah, it is very challenging. I do have a client that has the same issue, and you really have to you'd really have to like keep exact going as much as possible, try to find any differences. Your ad should actually be indicative of the fact that you're actually a B2B solution, not a B2C. So at least you're avoiding all those unnecessary clicks. Your landing page also should be as clear as possible. Again, making the point that is a B2B solution, not a B2C solution. And yeah, unfortunately, like it's a bit of a fight with all the negatives, and experimenting with the ad as much as possible.
Nice. And there is another question here. I will just bring it up on screen. So the next question from Ashley is, what bidding strategy do you use on competitor campaigns if you need to control CPCs?
I guess it will also depend on the amount of leads you're getting from your competitor campaigns, and also the quality of them. And if you're just at the beginning, like what is the account data behind, you can obviously control it with a target CPA, and adding also like some CPCs, like a CPCs minimum and maximum, for example, to control like very high CPCs. And perhaps some of the keywords are just not worth it. Like you do have to think about that too. if you're not like seeing the actual deals coming on the back of that, perhaps it's not the right competitor.
Yeah. And we have another question here, and it is, we are tracking lead submissions as conversion for B2B client having a sales cycle of 90 plus days, which is very long. Should we also track sales conversion from CRM out of those leads? Sorry.
So I guess like are you asking here if you should upload the sales data as a offline conversion? If the numbers are good, like when I say good as in there is something to work with, because also you have such a long cycle. And if the deals, for example, like this actual sales are very high in terms of the pay, but not in terms of the numbers, it will be quite challenging to really use it for the bidding strategy.
Nice. We have time for, I think, a couple more questions. So the next one, how do you scale a campaign that seems to be working well? Increase the budgets rapidly or slowly, or are we looking at that in the wrong way in terms of scaling?
I mean, scaling, it obviously is not just about the budget. Is like, what's the possibility of scaling in terms of also the searches? And are you maxed out? Like, is it limited by budget? Look at your impression share as well. Also the results. Is this a campaign that is more on the non-brand? Is it a competitive campaign? Like, do you get the good quality? So don't just look at increasing daily budgets like slowly or rapidly, but also look at like what you're trying to get out of that budget. I usually do it in increments, just because I find that if I do it too quickly, then I'm pretty much like I have a period in which like it doesn't work too well. So kind of minimizing the impact when you're like going with the daily budget can help, but also do look into the other aspects of scaling, not just budgets.
Nice. And there is one question which I will answer this one. So in terms of invalid clicks, are there any scripts we can run as advertisers via Google to filter out invalid traffic? There aren't any scripts that you can run. Obviously, you can get a traffic audit for free with Lunio, and you can check the invalid traffic rate across your campaigns if you do want to get hold of that data. But one free tool, one free resource that I would recommend for people interested in investigating invalid traffic and invalid activity on their Google account is abuseipdb.com, which is a database of third-party database of all kind of known malicious, fraudulent related IP addresses, which is worth looking into. So I think with that, I will close that down just because we have a few more minutes to wrap up. But any questions that we didn't get round to answering there, we will hopefully forward those questions on to Violeta and get you a response to some of those questions. But thank you very much for all those questions that were submitted. Really good to see people engaged in the chat today and finding the session useful. We will need to wrap up there so we don't run over time too much, but I just wanted to say a huge thank you to you, Violeta, for joining us today, and also for all the work and preparation you put in the lead up to this call, in kind of bringing a lot of useful insights and resources to the table. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. It's as I said, it's like full cycle to watch them, and now actually being invited to one.
Yeah, I'm very happy that we could have you on as a guest today. And as I said at the beginning, please do connect with Violeta on LinkedIn if there's anything you'd like to follow up about specifically, and just to stay in contact with her. Likewise, if you have any questions for us at Lunio, you can contact us directly via hello@lunio.ai, and we will be happy to help. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you are interested in getting a demo of Lunio and that free traffic audit, you can see how much of your traffic is currently invalid, and you can find the link to do that in the docs tab. And lastly, of course, big thanks to everyone for tuning in, either at the live session or on demand. And we hope to see you again at our next webinar. more details on that will be announced in the coming weeks. So we will have another webinar in November. But for now, take care, everyone, and all the best with your lead gen campaigns. See ya.
Bye, guys.